Hi everyone, and welcome to Teacher Use Microsoft Excel tutorial part 1, and this version is for Macs. In this tutorial, we're going to look at some of the first steps you want to take when opening up your data and getting ready to summarize it and then present it for your master's defense. And in this brief video, we're going to take a look at the data, the sample data we're going to be using for all 3 videos. We're also going to take a look at rows versus columns, and this is going to help you take a look at your own data and your own spreadsheet and figure out if you need to change any of the formatting before you get started. If you do, I'm going to show you how to do that. And then lastly, how to add any columns you might need. The objectives that we're working towards in this brief tutorial. First, teachers will be able to arrange their data in rows and columns appropriately, allowing for easy and efficient aggregation. And secondly, teachers will be able to add any additional columns that will better help to collect and arrange required data. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the sample spreadsheets, and what we're going to look for are rows versus columns. When you're aggregating data, this is going to be really important when we move on to the more advanced features that you use, and I'm going to show you why now. So let's start by looking at our sample data. We have 3 sets, data set A, data set B, and data set C. We're going to use the same 3 trackers for all 3 tutorials. And while they might not look exactly like yours, hopefully it will give you enough variety in the potential trackers you're working with that you can get an idea how to apply this to yours. So let's start with data A. Okay. So I'm first going to just briefly look at the data, acquaint myself with how it's laid out, and this is going to kind of operate like a think aloud. I'm going to kind of walk you through the process of what I'm thinking as I look at this spreadsheet so that I get an idea if there's anything I need to change before starting to work with the data. So if we go all the way to the left, the first 2 columns that I see are the first and last names of my students. You can see here I'm going to call them student 1, student 2, student 3, rather than the actual names for student privacy, of course. So I see the student names all the way on the left. The next part I see right here, these are the question numbers, and underneath we just see the answer choices that student selected. This is very specific data that breaks it down by question. This is very helpful for the teacher. In terms of summarizing your overall student data, you're probably not going to be using this specific set when it comes to your master's defense. So let's hop over to the next column. Here in this section, we see that the teacher has broken it down by main objectives or strands. It's hard for me to tell without knowing that class, but it looks like these are objectives. And again, it shows the student's mastery based on the questions on the left of each objective. Again, this is pretty specific. When it comes to overall aggregation of your student data for the year, you're probably going to be looking at more broad mastery of overall objectives. This is still helpful to look at, and in some cases you might be using this. And then the last one, we see the column we're probably going to work with, which is overall correct. And this is really helpful for us in looking at overall student mastery throughout the course of a year. We always want to make sure that students are listed in the far left column. The far left rows, and then on top you want to have the columns broken down by either questions, objectives, overall score. So we always want to see the student names all the way here on the left. This is going to help us later when we get into filtering because we can't filter columns, we can only filter out rows, and we're going to look at that in section 2. So this spreadsheet looks good to go. We have the students all the way on the left going down in rows, and we have the objectives in the columns. Great. So let's take a look at data B. Okay. When I open up data B and I take a look around, I see this one's actually flipped. And we have our objectives in column B, and we have our students in row 1. Like I mentioned in the last set of data, we actually want our students, which are shown up here at the top, we want them to be shown here in columns A and B. So while a beginning Excel user might think, oh no, I have to re-enter all my data, there's actually a really quick fix for how we can create a new spreadsheet and just flip the columns and rows. So I'm going to show you real quickly how we do that. So in case you've been entering your data throughout the year like this teacher did with the students at the top, it's really easy to just flip that around. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select and highlight all the data that we're looking at. So I'm going to start in that top left corner, and I'm going to move all the way to the bottom right corner, which is right here. You can right-click while you're using a Mac, so Control-click, which will show the right-click options, and I'm going to select Copy. I'm then going to open up a brand new spreadsheet. I'm going to change that to the normal layout rather than page layout. Great. And now I have a blank spreadsheet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up pasting this information into the blank spreadsheet. So I'm going to click the top left corner where I want to start pasting, cell A1. And instead of just pasting, I'm actually going to select Paste Special. And when I do that, it gives me some special options for how I want to paste that data. So the first thing, we are going to leave it checked on all. We do want to paste all the data that we copied. However, you want to look down here at the bottom and you have an option that says transpose. That's what you want to do because transpose means to flip the columns and the rows. So I'm just going to click transpose, select OK, and now you'll see all the same data from data B, except you're going to see that the objectives are shown up here in row 2, and the students are shown all the way on the left here like we want them. And again, you're going to see why this is important when we get to the second tutorial on filtering. For now, you just want to make sure that all your data is aligned like this one, with students on the far left and objectives going across the top. I'm going to save this, and then you can close that out. Corrected version. Great. So now I'm going to close that out. I'm going to close out data set B, and now let's take a look at the last one, which is data set C. Okay, I'm going to take a minute and get acquainted with this one. I see that the boxes are very small, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just so we can see that. Okay. As we look here, this one is set up similar to data set A. We see that the objectives are listed across the top in row 3, and we see that students, again, are listed in column C along the left-hand side. So this one is set up to go with rows and columns. This is exactly how we need it before we move into tutorial B. So I'm going to close that out. Great. So now we have our rows and columns set on all 3 data samples, and we're going to move on to the next thing that we want to take a look at. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add appropriate columns. When you're summarizing your data, you're going to be looking for several things, and you have the choice. You do not have to display all of these, but you are going to have to choose 2 ways of displaying your data. Right now, the only things that we have in these spreadsheets are the student names as well as the student answers. This doesn't really allow us to break down the data into things like sex, race, socioeconomic status, as well as possibly classes or groups. Obviously, there are other categories that you can add here for how you want to break down your data. But in order to do that, we first need to input that information into our data sets so we can later filter and create graphs. So we're going to go back and take a look at data A, B, and C and look at where we would add those columns and what that would look like.